When you're importing data from external databases, or even being sent the information in Excel, but it has originated from an external database, you sometimes find yourself with text that has extra spaces within it. Now, those extra spaces might be between words, they might be at the beginning or the end of words. If it were as simple as these are extra spaces, then you wouldn't be needing this lesson. A lot of these extra spaces are actually non-printing characters that are not visible to Excel, hence the reason why they look like a space, and when you try to replace the spaces, they don't go. Before we look at the tools that we can use, it's worth exploring on the second tab here called char, two very useful functions that will help put things in context. First of those functions is called char, and that will give you the actual character represented by a number. Now, in the ASCII number character set, any number from 0 to 255 will produce a letter, a number, or some crazy shape. So 103, see here, I'm using the function here, char b2, is a lowercase g. If I then went for 156, I find that that's a OE symbol. If I go for 67, I find that's an uppercase C. Now, this is a little bit of experimentation unless you happen to have an ASCII table sat next to you. Alternatively, we can use the code function, which we have here in A4, where the code function will tell you what the ASCII number is for a given letter or shape. So over here, where I've put a capital G, if I put a lowercase g, we find that the ASCII number is 103. And I know that because up here, I had 103 and it gave me a lowercase g. I can put any character I like in here. What about an uppercase P? Well, that's 80. Lowercase p, that's 112. So in the ASCII table, I can find out what character is represented by what number, or if I have the number, I can find what character that represents. Hopefully that's a little bit of background for you. In our data, for cleansing purposes, we then have three very useful functions. The first of those is called clean, and it's certainly worth running on any strings of text that look like they have some spaces within them. If I say equals clean, open brackets, pick on the cell, close brackets, return, and then replicate that down all four of these, and just widen. What the clean does, it removes all the ASCII non-printing characters with the numbers 0 to 31. So if any of those have been imported with your data, they have now been cleaned out. And you can see here that guy simple had a space at the beginning and a space at the end, still has a space at the beginning and at the end. Simple guy, and very simple guy. Very simple guy has lost this big space at the front there because of the clean function. That's the first step. Clean removes the non-printing characters located in the ASCII table between 0 and 31. Now, it hasn't taken away all the spaces, as we can see. That's the clean function. Let's put that at the top of the column. If we use the clean function in conjunction with another one, which is trim, so I do the clean and then I do the trim. Obviously, in the real case scenario, you would do one embedded inside the other. This is just to show what takes away what. So equals trim of the already cleansed data, and then replicate. We can then see that guy simple does get the leading space removed. Simple guy, again, there's probably a space at the end there. There is there. And the only way to find out if there is there is to do a copy and paste special. Let's copy that, paste special it down here, paste special for the values and have a look. Inside it still contains the space at the end, but having done the trim, we then copy that, paste special it down here for the values. We find the space at the end is gone. So trim has been very helpful for us on those two values, not unfortunately on the third one down, and then the trim here, well, effectively that was already cleaned up by the clean function. So we've had clean to remove all the non-printing characters that fall in the ASCII table between 0 and 31, and then trim to remove any leading and trailing spaces, which actually happens to be the ASCII character number 32. But it doesn't remove any spaces between words. It only removes any that occur before the text starts and after the text finishes. But that leaves us with a slight problem here on the third option. Simple guy still has a space at the front, even after running the clean function and after running the trim function. So what is happening to this one guy? I hear you shout. Well, what's happening is a different ASCII character has been used here. A non-printing space has been used, which is actually a different character to a space. A non-printing space is character 160, and it is quite common, particularly if the data has been stored in HTML at any point. So how do we get rid of the character 160? Well, we could use the substitute. And what we'll do with the substitute command is replace, if it's there, character 160, with character 32 that our trim can then get rid of. We'll do it for the whole set, equals substitute, which is the text value we want to deal with. We'll go back to the source one here, A2. What is the old text? Well, the old text is char 160, comma, what is the new text? Char 32. And then we can close the brackets because we don't want the optional parameter of instance of the number. Close brackets, return. Now what we should find, if we replicate this down, is things don't actually look any different. These look the same as those because the non-printing space to Excel looks exactly the same. But what now will happen, if we now run our trim and our clean, let's run them together on our new result, then effectively our finished result should see us without any leading or trailing spaces whatsoever. What we then do is take our final entries there and do a paste special to get the values back, just as we've done before when we've used functions, and these then now become our final values. Ideally, in a real data set, we would have pasted those over the top of these entries and got rid of any of the working columns. You could do all of those working columns in one place. I've amalgamated trim and clean here, but I've made a separate column for the substitute. Ideally, you would put that in the same function. So everything would happen in the same cell, replicate that down the column, and then you have your new values that have taken away char 160, which is the non-breaking space, trim to take away any leading or trailing char 32s, which is a normal space, which we've already replaced the char 160 with, and then clean to remove any of the non-printing characters that fall into the character sets 0 to 31. Trust that that makes absolute sense. And for those of you that have been dealing with imported data with spaces, trailing spaces, end spaces that you haven't been able to get rid of just by doing find and replace, this is your method for getting rid of all those spaces. So the non-printing characters that effectively you can't see in Excel, but they look like spaces, can now be removed using the clean function. That annoying little non-breaking space needs the use of the substitute to swap it for a normal space, which you can then remove using the trim function.